Good day, dear students. Welcome to another year of fun learning. You are now almost halfway to your dream of becoming a good teacher. There are always times of hardships which make you think of turning back. But remember, roses start to grow with thorns, and their bloom will come at the perfect time. Endure the struggle because, in the end, it is you who will benefit from the fruits of your patience and sacrifices. This module is designed to equip you to become more advanced in learning literature. The more you're exposed to it, the more learning you can extract from it. There are times you might get bored of reading texts. It's okay to take breaks and do things you enjoy. When you're tired, just have some pauses, but never stop. Stopping in is never growing, and I don't want you to be stagnant in your potential. Carefully learn the lenses on how to analyze literature. This will lead you to a better and more reliable literary analysis. Africa and Asia are among the powerhouses of literature. Their literature has influenced people worldwide, not just for fun, but because it carries important life teachings. Read the literary text, not just because you have tasks to complete, but because you have something to gain from them. It is very fulfilling to learn while finishing your work tasks rather than just completing them without gaining anything. If you find it hard, search for answers. If it makes you even more confused, ask for help. It is better to ask for help than to drive off with wrong interpretations. Deadlines are deadlines, and considerations are given on a matter of life and death only. So value your time, prioritize, and be a self directed learner. After the lesson, you will be able to determine the easiest and hardest approach in literary criticism, search for similarities with other approaches, and recognize the reliability of the approaches by providing indicators and guidelines. In this chapter, you will be introduced to the different types of approaches on how to respond and do a critical literary analysis. Also, you will learn how text is being judged accordingly with the help of the said lenses. Today, we will first discuss the common and helpful lenses used to respond to a literary text. The first one is formalist criticism. Formalist criticism regards literature as a unique form of human knowledge that needs to be examined on its own terms. It focuses on elements of form, such as style, structure, tone, and imagery found within the text. The primary goal is to determine how these elements work together with the text's content to shape its effects upon readers. Second is biographical criticism. It begins with a simple but central insight that literature is written by actual people. Understanding an author's life can help readers more thoroughly comprehend the work. However, biographical data should amplify the meaning of the text, not drown it out with irrelevant material. Meanwhile, historical criticism seeks to understand a literary work by investigating the social, cultural, and intellectual context that produced it. This includes the artist's biography and milieu. A key goal of historical critics is to understand the effect of a literary work upon its original readers. Then we have gender criticism. Gender criticism examines how sexual identity influences the creation and reception of literary works. Originally an offshoot of feminist movements, it now includes various approaches, including the masculinist approach. It analyzes how sexual identity influences the reader of a text and examines how the images of men and women in literature reflect or reject social forces that have historically kept the sexes from achieving total equality. Next in the list is psychological criticism. It reflects the effect that modern psychology has had upon both literature and literary criticism. Fundamental figures in this approach include Sigmund Freud, whose psychoanalytic theories change our notions of human behavior by exploring areas like wish fulfillment, sexuality, the unconscious, and repression. Carl Jung's theories about the unconscious are also a key foundation of psychological criticism. The following are an investigation of the creative process of the artist, what is the nature of literary genius, and how does it relate to normal mental functions. 2. The psychological study of a particular artist, usually noting how an author's biographical circumstances affect or influence their motivations and or behavior. And finally, the analysis of fictional characters using the language and methods of psychology. We also have sociological criticism. It examines literature in the cultural, economic, and political context in which it is written or received. It explores the relationships between the artist and the society. One influential type of sociological criticism is Marxist criticism, which focuses on the economic and political elements of art, often emphasizing the ideological content of literature. Then, Marxist criticism is often argued that all art is political, either challenging or endorsing the status quo. It can illuminate political and economic dimensions of literature that other approaches might overlook. Next in our list is mythological criticism. It emphasizes the recurrent universal patterns underlying most literary works. It combines insights from anthropology, psychology, history, and comparative religion. A key concept in mythological criticism is the archetype, a symbol, character, situation, or image that evokes a deep universal response. Next is archetypes. According to Carl Jung, all individuals share a collective unconscious, a set of primal memories common to the human race, existing below each person's conscious mind. Archetypes such as the moon, the sun, fire, night, and blood trigger the collective unconscious. Northrop Frye defined archetypes as symbols that recur often enough in literature to be recognizable as elements of one's literary experience as a whole. Then we also have the reader response criticism. It posits that literature exists not just as a printed artifact, but as a transaction between the text and the reader's mind. This approach describes what happens in the reader's mind while interpreting a text, emphasizing that reading, like writing, is a creative process. According to reader response critics, literary texts do not contain fixed meanings. Instead, meanings derive from individual readings. This means two different readers may interpret the same text differently, and even the same reader may find new meanings upon rereading a text years later. This approach also considers how religious, cultural, and social values influence our readings. Then we have deconstructionist criticism. It rejects the traditional assumption that language can accurately represent reality. Deconstructionists view language as fundamentally unstable, meaning the words can conjure different images for different people. Consequently, literature composed of words possesses no fixed single meaning. According to critic Paul Deman, deconstructionists emphasize the impossibility of making actual expressions coincide with what is meant to be expressed. They focus on how language is used in a text rather than what is being said. Deconstructionists aim to show how texts can be broken down into mutually irreconcilable positions, challenging the notion of authors' ownership of their texts and how language is used to achieve power. Then we move to the postmodern moral criticism. It asks how the work in question affects the reader. This approach, also known as neo-humanist, evaluates morality, Critics working from a moral perspective consider form and figurative language, but they prioritize the moral philosophy teaching in literature. When approaching a text with moral criticism, we ask key questions such as what moral lesson or ethical teaching is the author presenting through characters, plot, or theme? How do characters, settings, and plot events represent or allegorize moral or ethical principles? According to critic Paul Elmer Moore, it is the critic's duty to determine the moral tendency of literary works and to judge them on that basis. The greatest critics are those who discriminate between the false and the true, the deformed and the normal, and who preach harmony, proportion, and order. We judge the value of literature based on its moral lesson or ethical teaching. Literature that is ethically sound and encourages virtue is praised, while literature that misguides or corrupts is condemned. So there you have it. These are the critical approaches in literature which I hope you should master.